Namaste to all viewers. Welcome to the Atharva Forum. I am Amaruvi Devanathan. I am an author. The art of looting our arts, Murtis, and historical artifacts has been so perfected by so many players that it has become nearly impossible to trace our lost icons and bring them back home to India where they belong. Not many people know that thousands of icons and murtis that were worshipped in temples and monasteries built by legendary kings of the Chola, Pandya, Vijayanagara empires are currently being displayed as mere icons and relics in the museums of the world. Vijay Kumar, our guest today, got introduced and said to me, to my horror, precisely, you know, all these gods that you have written about have been stolen from India. And India Pride project is trying to bring these gods back home to India. And I am the co-founder of that India Pride project. From then on, I have been an ardent fan and an admirer of Vijay and his works. The quite recent Ananthmangalam Rama restitution, when the UK government handed over Lord Rama, Lakṣmaṇa, and Sītā to the High Commission of India. Welcome everybody once again. Vijay Kumar, namaste.
Thank you.
Ananthmangalam case.
Yeah.
This of the idols or the remains of Lord Ram, Lakṣmaṇa, and Sītā. How did it all happen, and how were you involved in it? When did you get into this?
Again, it was about a 4.5-year battle. It was not something like a point and shoot or a point. So it was a battle, and for 2 years, I was distracted into a wrong direction. You know, all these are fortuitous. I firmly believe the gods pick and choose the time they want to come. So basically, for 2 years, he sent me on a wrong route. And I'm going to show you another example of why this is. Because what happened was, I'm going to show you that as well. In 2016, in a dealer, so as part of our work, we routinely scroll dealer pages and objects that come up for sale, Indian objects that come up for sale in auctions. In 2016, a very spectacular, there was only one bronze that was put up on antique dealer association's website. What was interesting is, we did not know whether it was Rama or Lakṣmaṇa, because obviously, when the two of them are together, you can find the difference. But when they are alone, you don't know whether it is a Rama and Lakṣmaṇa. So what happened was, I was looking basically for, so let's give you this example. Here you see, I don't want to name the temple, it's a temple under worship. But once you train your eye, and that has been the biggest problem, that our eyes are so used to not or believing what we are seeing, that we fail to spot the obvious. So when you look at this, this is a fantastic set of Rama, Lakṣmaṇa, and Sītā. The Rama and Sītā are brilliant early Chola bronzes, but the Lakṣmaṇa is a modern fake. So once somebody points it out, you can clearly see the metal is different, the design, style, body structure, everything is different. But until somebody explains to you, you don't realize that, yeah, the Lakṣmaṇa is not part of the group. A similar case, let's see if you can spot this. This is another temple where you see the Rama is a brilliant later Chola Rama, but then the Sītā is a later replacement. Now, I was basically looking at such exercises to see if there is any temple that is missing either a Rama or a Lakṣmaṇa. So I was basically looking at idols that are, when I say idols, Murtis that are under worship. So Rama group that are currently in India. So what happened in this current case was, we were looking at a antique dealer association, like a membership website where they advertise their dealer profiles, and one of their dealers, interestingly, had either a Rama or a Lakṣmaṇa, brilliant bronze, on the dealer, not our actual dealer's website, but a dealer association's website. So we were at that point of time not sure whether it was Rama or Lakṣmaṇa. And as we have seen many cases where the complete Rama groups have been displaced in Tamil Nadu, I was basically searching in temples under worship that are missing either a Rama or Lakṣmaṇa. And for 2 years, I just couldn't find a match, and it was going on. And that was the time when one of our volunteers who had been passing through the shop, at the dealer's actual shop in London, actually took a, obviously we tell our volunteers not to endanger, not to put them at risk. If they're allowed photography, we ask them to take photos if ever they see an Indian object that is out for on sale or auction. So he managed to get a long shot of the shop window, which had a similar looking Murti, but I could spot that the crown was very different. So now if you go back and see the crown of the Rama and Lakṣmaṇa, in the Ananthmangalam case, you will see that the Rama's crown is slightly different from the Lakṣmaṇa. So that got me saying that maybe the shop has another similar, and then that's when the realization hit me that maybe a whole group has been missing. And that's when we went back. And at this point of time, we have to appreciate the work done by the French Institute in Pondicherry. The French Institute in Pondicherry has been documenting Tamil Nadu temples right from 1950s, and their archive is very meticulous, but sadly they covered only about 5 to 8% of the temples at that point of time, which again was rather manually done before. Early part of 2016, they managed to digitize it. So earlier, when we did the Śrī Purandhan, which you're going to see later, we had to go through and sit with them with the actual thumb card, bin cards and all that. But now it's digital. So we went and looked at entire Rama sets, and that's where we started looking at stylistic. So as somebody who is, my personal interest is South Indian bronzes and especially Chola bronzes. So when you look at studying Chola bronzes, you tend to generally look at Chola bronzes as a pinnacle of bronze casting. And then we tend to look at Nayaka's work as slightly, I wouldn't say inferior, but in terms of stylistic comparison, you've already reached the high water point. So the Vijayanagara bronzes are in between them, but this was a very, very superlative quality Vijayanagara bronze. And we could then filter our search to a particular region where we see such brilliant work in the transition phase. So the Cholas basically stopped around the 13th, 14th centuries, and then you have a Pandya period, and then you have the Vijayanagara. And the early Vijayanagara period produced fantastic bronzes that would compete, I would say, a very close second to Chola bronzes. And that's when we shortened down our search to a few temples that had intact at that point of time. And then we came across the French Institute Pondicherry's archive had documented this in the late 1950s. Having said that, it was actually Rama, Lakṣmaṇa, Sita, and Hanuman. And the Hanuman actually caught my eye, and the first match was actually the Hanuman. Unfortunately, currently the claim is under process, so we're just saying that the Hanuman should also technically join the group. We reached out because we've already worked with the High Commission in London. Mr. Rahul Nagar is a good friend. We have worked almost 4 cases with him in the last 3 years, starting with the Brahma Brahmani from Gujarat, and then the Nalanda Buddha, which we wanted to talk about. And then we did last year. So the Brahma Brahmani came in 2017. The Nalanda Buddha came on August 15th of 2018. And last year, August 15, 2019, we got the Nardana Krishna and the limestone pilaster from Chandavaram and AP. And early last month, we managed to bring back Natesa dancing Shiva from Rajasthan. So we had already built a rapport with him. And when we reached out to him to say that, look, we have a firm match for the Rama. It's with this dealer. Probably he also has another bronze because we did not have a good photograph, but he definitely has another one similar. So, and we also reached out to the Idol Wing in Chennai, which is of course a specialized department of CBCID police, Tamil Nadu Police, which was incorporated in 1985 as a division to tackle antiquities theft in Tamil Nadu temples. Mr. Vijay Kumar is a very good friend, and he's been helping us a lot in reopening old cases. So we passed the details to him, and lucky he went back even about around to December, January of this year. He managed to lock in the actual FIR. And we came to realize that there was a theft that happened in 1978, which is very, very important because it is after the UN statute. The UN, India and Italy actually championed the UN to come up with an international statute or a convention to protect theft of cultural property, to stop, combat the theft of cultural property. And this came into effect in 1970. So any nation that is a signatory to it, we only have to prove that it was stolen after the convention, they will return it. That doesn't mean that anything prior to 1970 is somehow untouchable. It is not the case, but we have to go to court. Now, having said that, once we had all the ammunition, we know we had the match, we had the FIR, we know when it was looted. Metropolitan Police and the Indian High Commission reached out to the dealer and gave him the matches. The strength of our matching was so good that the dealer had no choice, but he had been a good faith purchaser. He had bought it in good faith. He had made all the checks and balances at that point of time. Maybe with some organization or individual was not as diligent as us, but he came up and said, I not only have the Rama, I have the Lakṣmaṇa and also the Sītā, and he gave all three back to us. So I'm just going to show you, if you're okay, the actual matching process. Are we okay with it?
Yeah, I was just about to ask that only. How did you match? I mean, do you have any kind of software which is doing this?
It's predominantly old-fashioned elbow grease. It's actually like a game to me now. So when I come home, I just go through thousands of images every day, trying to find matches. So that's how I do it. So here goes. So this is the first time anybody is looking at this particular work. So yes, this is the French Institute archival photo. Obviously, I've blanked out the Hanuman for obvious reasons. And you can see the date of, so this is, so you have to realize that this is 28 of 37 of this temple, and there are thousands of temples. So you're looking at almost 1 lakh images that you have to run through. And their archival, they use only the keywords. So this is the quality of photograph that is available. So basically, from this, you go into more details. And then this is the Rama group when photographed in the Ananthmangalam temple. So this becomes a documented archive. The date is properly. So actually, they take physical notes and they write down on the bin card when it was photographed. And this is very useful when we go to court, for example, if somebody disputes it. So this was the dealer website. Obviously, I've blanked out much of the data. This was the image that was put up on internet, and that's how. So this is now it looks very easy, but it's almost 8 months into 2 hours per day of work to come to this point. Once we do it, close matches, not always we get hits. Now what you're looking at is, okay, we are 100% clear that it's the same, but then we still go into more details. We can look at, we go zoom in, and then you can actually see each of these matches. Obviously, there's a little more that I'm not privy to explain more, but then every dent, as I told you, the last wax method, because each of them are unique. So even a small casting defect or a small imperfection shows up when we search it. So this is how, this was the evidence that was presented to the dealer, and you can actually see that how meticulous our work is. So this was what helped lodge irrefutable claim to bring back the Murtis.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, but then how did you identify that this was from Ananthmangalam? Was it because of that FIR and all that?
No, it's because the IFP archive actually names the temple. So when you're looking at the IFP archive, the archive is by district. So it actually names the temple, it names the district, It tells who took the photograph and what date. You actually know on what date it was photographed when still inside the temple. So the last it was photographed was in 1958. So it could have gone out any point of time, and that's where the idol wing came in. They managed to go to the police station of that district, of that village, and managed to dig up old records to come up with the theft.
So in this incident, if for the understanding of everybody, so it was because there was an FIR available which clearly established that there was these Murtis were lost. They have been looted. Can we say that? So every idol theft has to be reported and all that. You used.
See, it makes our job easier. In fact, we are now battling with a collector or a private organization in the US for the return of a Nataraja, because in that case, it was the temple custodians basically were given another. So they were lost, they were stolen, and the police gave them alternative bronze and destroyed their FIR.
Oh.
So all this happened in the early 1970s. So now we are not able to lodge a claim because unlike this good faith purchaser, the current exhibitor in the US is insistent that we prove that it was the same bronze that was stolen, despite us having photograph. Of course, we were not able to find the temple documented by the French Institute, but then the temple register, they had taken a photograph and they had kept it, and it was photographed sometime in the 1960s. So, so if it ticks all the boxes, then it becomes a fait accompli. There are no elbow rooms, and that is our request. In fact, most of the time, earlier as well, the institutions try to wriggle away on. You need to understand that when there is an agreement or a title, when you own something, you have to have a clear title. But most cases, institutions tend to wriggle out. They don't agree to the spirit of it. You're caught with a stolen idol. Irrespective of whether there's an FIR lodged or not, there is an in situ photo in the temple. It is only right that you return it. Unfortunately, for example, Italy is establishing it. They say, you are the owner. You show me that you have legal title. Why are you asking me to prove? So Chola bronze can only be made in Tamil Nadu. You are having it in America. Right. You prove how you legally got it. But unfortunately, India has been not that forceful, and we are letting away a lot of initiative because we want to be seen as a soft power maybe, and we call it voluntary return when there is so much of fight that is going on. So they have no other choice to return, and then sometimes they're called gifts. You gift something if you own it. So somebody is returning a stolen object, it is not gifting back. It is actually restitution.
Right, right. And now may I ask you this. How long is it going to take for Lord Rama to come back to Ananthmangalam?
Well, having known Mr. Rahul very well, I wouldn't be surprised if he is here even next week, because they are operating regular flights. The Vande Bharat missions are happening.
Oh.
So it's just that they need to ensure that they are properly packed during COVID, and then they are heavy, as you would know.
Yeah,
These are solid bunches. In fact, we had to organize special tables because the three of them were together so heavy. So we just need to ensure that they are properly packed and safely brought back. So I'm confident that they will return home after their not 14 years but 48 years.
That was so fantastic. Now we will from Vishnu we will go to Lord Shiva. Right. So in your book, The Idol Thief, you have dealt with in a very large scale about the Śrī Rājagoplāsvāmi case.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So that is one of the very moving episodes. Of course, the whole book is too moving. So in that particular case, can you tell me how could this happen? How could the Śrī Rājagoplāsvāmi case even happen?
Well, what was interesting is the temple was ruined. There were actually a killer bee, that's what they claim, infestation. There was an old woman who was guarding. So it was actually not a single theft. These are like twin villages, Śrī Rājagoplāsvāmi and Suttamalli. They are next to each other.
Right.
So Sutamali was ruined, so they bought all the idols, all the Murtis to Sri Prandan. And there was this old lady who was guarding it. For some reason, I think she got old, or nobody knows what happened. She left. And these fell into disrepute. And at some point of time, the custodians, I don't want to name who they are, the much vilified custodians of Tamil Nadu, wanted to come and make a new gate for the temple. And at that point of time, they saw that there was a lock fixed on it. So the villagers basically wanted a steel gate, and by the time they went, took the measurements, and then they went and touched the lock. That's when they realized the lock was cut with an axa blade and stuck with the glue. So the robbers had actually sawn through and just stuck it back to look as though the temple was closed. And by which time the entire collection of both Sri Puranda and Sutamali were exported out, and exported in very strange circumstances because they were declared as garden furniture. They were declared as brassware. In fact, the Ganesha that went to Toledo was sold for $340. Officially, that's what the invoice claims. But the big one, the Sri Puranda Nataraja, was bought finally after a lot of negotiation by the National Gallery of Australia for $5.6 million. So what was interesting is, I take this opportunity to just show you how we did it, because it's much easier for me. I believe in show and tell. So this is what happened. We didn't know whether it was Sutamali or Sri Prandan. So this is what I talked about the French Institute earlier before it was documented. You actually see small bin cards. So this is the size. So you run through, you go there in the morning with multiple addictions of caffeine, and then you go and run through, say, 1,000 of these small cards. You look at eye copies, you find something that's vaguely familiar, because again, they did not take actual photographs straight on. So they just managed to do their job. So some of them are in profile, some of them are outside. So you just look for certain vital clues, which I will show you. And what was interesting was, once you do this, once you have visible match, you tell the customer, the IFP, they will go to the transparencies and develop it and show you the bigger one. And in this case, this is how the racks are. So you go through each of these, a whole room filled with that. So this was the IFP photograph when it was when the dancer was still inside the temple. This was when it was stolen. The priest is playing to an empty shrine. In fact, he was suspected of the robbery. As usual, our police did their routine questioning with him. So he came back with multiple bumps. This was a robber photo, which is very interesting, that I think you should know. People are using social media. Earlier, the collectors and dealers used to send their art experts to India on recce trips, and they would pick and choose the best of Indian art to loot, meaning it was the loot to order. So like, for example, Sotheby's in London, their reps will come stay in North India with our smugglers. They will go on recce trips and they'll say, hey, this will sell, this will sell. These are not some random thefts that are happening, but a targeted looting on an industrial scale, after which the robbers would go. But now, after technology, they don't even have to come. So this is a robber photo that was shared via social media. So this is immediately after he was looted. So definitely this is not in New York. This is in some local house in TN. And this is after he was sent via Hong Kong to London. There is a professional restorer who's now been officially charged, who actually, this is the reason why I gave you the introduction about buried bronzes. So you can see the coloration of the bronze. So originally when he was under worship, you can see the color. So now the restorer in London gave him a greenish patina to make it look as though he is a buried bronze. So he actually applied chemical coating to give him a greenish coloration. And afterwards, Subhash Kapoor sold it for $5.6 million. Today's exchange rate, what, 80? You are the better numbers. Is it 80 crore or 30 crores? Today's exchange, 36 crore or whatever. And so when we supplied the matches, so we went, did about 32 points of breakages all over. The curator jokingly mentioned, he dismissed our claim and said there are hundreds of Natarajas, they all look the same. You guys don't know what you're talking about. My Nataraja is not the Sri Prandan Nataraja. So instead of giving him the proof, we put it out on YouTube. So today, if you go to Poetry in Stone channel on YouTube and Google Return of the Dancer, you can actually see the evidence that was presented to the Australian gallery. It was so embarrassing for them that the Nataraja was brought back by the Australian PM, given to Prime Minister Modi, and there you see him with another success, our first success, the Vridhachalam Mardhanari, which is also a fantastic story, physically shipped back to India, taken back to the temple, placed in the same site from where, so this was where he would normally reside. And what is more interesting was, this is my most satisfying thing, this was the how the temple was when the looting happened, no, ruined, uncared for. This is how the villagers spruced up the temple to receive the Lord back. And this is where we feel satisfaction for our job, when the Lords return back to their homes and a regular puja worship, and the villagers celebrated his return.
Yeah, this is a fantastic story. But in this Śrī Puranthan case, now after the smuggling and all this happened, I had two questions there. One is, how did you get involved? How did, what made you to pay particular attention to this, number one? Number two, how could such a huge statue be smuggled out of the country? Probably it should have gone via air or via shipping. Is nobody paying attention to this?
Well, that's again something you will be shocked to know, because I'm in the shipping industry. They were shipped as LCL. That means they were not even shipped in a full container. They were stuffed in a public CFS, government CFS in Sanko, declared as garden furniture for a full container of antiquities. And this particular Nataraja was shipped as a loose cargo load as brassware. So,
but
yeah.
Is there no inspection to that?
That's where I say in a lot of people realize that our customs, because of the monies involved, plus we also need to understand that our customs are not alone to be blamed. This Nataraja went through Hong Kong, it went through London, it ended up in New York. I would say that the world over, there are porous ports, and that's where we work on capacity building. We work with world customs to try and educate them on how to spot antiquities trafficking. The second question is, the money involved is big. So we firmly believe that this is similar to illicit wildlife trafficking. The killing stops when the buying stops. That's where we want to be a deterrent. So if somebody is going to throw $5 million, no amount of policing, no amount of moral policing, no amount of security will be able to safeguard our village temples. So that's where we are focusing on. And I would say that we have got tremendous success in the sense that last year, Australia banned any public museum from buying Indian antiquities. They've lost so much, almost $26 million so far, that they said, please don't buy any more of Indian art.
That's a good one. And I mean, again, you found this out in some museum website, and then that got you interested?
So what happened was, we were actually tracking the Vridhachalam Mardhanari, because that was, so you have to understand that Kapoor was already arrested in Germany in 2011. He had been, through a Red Corner Interpol notice, he had been brought to India in 2012, extradited. But then the case was going nowhere because there's no evidence. A case in parallel here is, there was another bigger smuggler called Vaman Giya in Rajasthan. He was arrested in 2002 because a BBC journalist exposed him. He was acquitted in 2013 for want of evidence, because not even one of the so-called 10,000 objects that he smuggled out via a host of 4 friend companies in Switzerland to Sotheby's, London. In fact, it's part of a book by Peter Watson. There's one chapter on India called Sotheby's, The Inside Story, where he did some sting operations in India, where the robbers claimed, do you want the Taj Mahal? I can ship it out in parts. So that was the extent to which they were talking about. But what was interesting is, our legal system is so faulty that he's still acquitted because of want of evidence. We didn't want that to happen with Kapoor. So even after a year of being in jail, not a single restitution or even an identification happened. And that's when, interestingly, what happened, one of our friends in the US, another journalist, Jason Felch, published some robber photos. And there was one particular object that I was very, very familiar with, was the Vruddhachalam Ardhanari. And the Vruddhachalam Ardhanari's case is, I had actually blogged about the Ardhanari because it was my favorite icon. And it was bought by the Art Gallery of South Australia. And he was such a beautiful sculpture that I didn't realize that it had already left Indian shores. I had blogged about it, about the iconographical aspects of the Vruddhachalam Ardhanari, not knowing that it had already been exported out. And Australia was stonewalling all our efforts. And at some point, we realized that something needed to be done. And we started looking at whatever they had bought from Subhash Kapoor, Australia. So I just want to show you, because I think it's easier for me to show and tell. So this is what happened with the Vruddhachalam Ardhanari. So this was when the Ardhanari's beautiful composition was still in as a Kosta Murti. There you can see that both our hands are broken, but then until I point out that the hands are broken, you don't realize the beauty of the sculpture, a fantastic 10th century androgynous form of Shiva. And I actually studied this bronze saying that because you are fusing the male and female portions, the iconography pushes the tilt to one side. And imagine if this Nandi was not, bull was not there, it would look very odd. So actually the sculptor brings in the Nandi to balance the sculpture. And this was what I had blogged about, not realizing that by which time. So this is the robber photo, which was sent by the robbers. So they had actually taken it out and people are bidding on this photo. And then it was bought by the Art Gallery of New South Wales. But interestingly, when I recognized this, the moment I saw it on the paper, on Jason Feld's website called Chasing Afraid, I knew it was the Vruddhachalam Ardhanari. So I reached out to social media, and one of my friends, Atish, who's part of our team, volunteers, he asked a friend of his who's from Vruddhachalam to go to the temple. We were expecting an empty niche, but then they had made a fake. So you can see that the robbers had actually made a fake replica was there. And we managed to prove it, and the Ardhanari came back along with it. So this opened a lot of good publicity for us. People started believing that no, as a group, these guys can deliver results. And law enforcement started working with us more seriously. Government started taking it seriously. Australia opened up their archives, sharing all the provenance information. They appointed a retired judge to do a due diligence. And that's when they realized the amount of optical due diligence they did on all the purchases. The provenance paperwork was so pathetic for all their collections. But what is strange is that Australia have returned only where we can show clear proof that it was stolen after 1970. They are still holding on to objects where we have not been able to prove, and that answers your first question.
Yeah.
Some people don't want any stolen objects. There are some people who push to find proof. Unfortunately, because of the length and breadth of India, it's not easy for us to find. Even in cases like we have found a Sirgari Samandar that is stolen, that was last documented in 1968, entered Australia in 1969. They have not yet returned it back.
Yeah. Now I have one final question for you. Is it a fact that these kind of art loads, the looting of the gods, happens only in the South India? Or is it a pan-India phenomenon? Have you had any success elsewhere?
Well, we've had tremendous success. First of all, it's a good question to ask. People, because of the successful restitutions in Tamil Nadu, people think that Tamil Nadu is some magnet for art theft, which is not the case. To put things in perspective, just with Subhash Kapoor, the villain of my book, not the hero of my book, his warehouses and collections were raided in 2012 as part of what is called now the Operation Hidden Idol by Homeland Security. They seized 2,622 objects, that was his holding stock, valued at over 840 crores. That's about $108 million. That was his holding stock. One dealer, just known storage in New York in 14 locations, of which only about 80 are Tamil Nadu. 80. So we've cracked a lot of cases in Bihar. We have cracked a lot of cases in Orissa. We're currently working on a lot in West Bengal and Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. Unfortunately, they are not as well documented as Tamil Nadu. And I think people don't realize that even if something has been lost way back in the past, there is a chance to go after it. So I'm leading you to ask me the question about the Nalanda Buddha so that I can explain that no amount of passage of time is a deterrent. We cracked this fantastic case that a series of thefts that happened in the Nalanda, the sacred site of Nalanda. From the museum there, 14 bronzes were stolen. And we cracked this over WhatsApp. I'm not joking. We cracked it over WhatsApp. So what is interesting is this bronzes were hidden. We call it fencing in the art market. They were never seen after that till they came up for an auction in a TFF mastered show, wherein one of our group members, I would say a friend, Italian lady called Linda, who runs an art crime institute in a beautiful place called Amelia in Italy. So she had actually volunteered to go. I told her, you're going for the art fair. If you look at any Indian object, send me images. And as fate would have it, and I still feel that, again, sorry to repeat myself, the gods choose when they want to come home. So my good friend, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, who's the principal economic advisor to Prime Minister Modi, our good friend when he was in Singapore before he took this government position, was talking to a retired ASA official about my work, and he said, Vijay is doing this in Singapore. So Dr. Bishwas, the retired officer of ACI, said, can Vijay solve this theft? How this happened in 1961. So what was interesting was, again, I'm going to show you how we did it, because it's more interesting. So this was what happened.
Vijay,
yeah.
Vijay, just we have 5 minutes. We have to complete.
Okay, I'll finish with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were 14 bronzes stolen in 1961 and 2 bronzes stolen in 1962. And we tracked with photographs that Dr. Bishwas provided. We managed to find one in the LACMA, which has been matched. And the second object, so these are all WhatsApp exchanges that are happening in midnight between Europe and us. We've managed to find this Buddha that was on sale. Now, vaguely familiar, but slightly different. So I was still not able to place it, but I knew that I had a match. So this is what I say to my friend. I have a match, think I have a match, think I have a match. And this is at 3:48 in the night. And at 3:48 p.m., I'm looking at images, and we are just going back and forth on it. And what was stunning, why I was misled, was the robbers had actually broken. So if you look at it, this is the original archival photograph. They had broken the leaf from this side, and they had stuck it on the other side to make it look different. So this was the Buddha that was. So we managed to prove beyond doubt. So ASI sent out a letter so this was actually on sale by a British dealer in Netherlands. So this object, Buddha, came back to London, and the Metropolitan Police helped us. And then they still disputed our match. And then the ICOM official came in. Having said that, Amaruvi, I know you've almost stopped my time clock. I'm going to play one video. That would be the conclusion of this case. So I'm
event of restitution of India's national cultural heritage, a 12th century AD bronze image of Bhagwan Buddha. This is an incredible story of a 900-year-old cultural heritage that was stolen 57 years ago and is being returned back to India today. This image was among the 14 bronze statues stolen from the Archaeological Survey of India Museum at Nalanda in August 1961. Earlier this year, the High Commission and the Met Police were alerted by Mr. Vijay Kumar of India Pride Project about surfacing of this bronze statue at an auction organized by a London dealer. The Archaeological Survey of India confirmed these findings to the High Commission, and the same were conveyed to the Met Police. We take this opportunity to thank Metropolitan Police, in particular DS Rob Uknu, DC Sophie Hayes, and the entire team of officers of the Art and Antique Unit of the Met Police for their swift and effective investigation in this case. We thank the officials from the Department of DCMS. We also thank Mr. Vijay Kumar and the entire India Pride Project team, Ms. Linda Albertson, CEO of ACRA, Mr. Martin Filkenberg of Royal Dutch Police, and Ms. Frans Desmarais, Director of International Council for Museums, for all their contributions in this event. Now may I request Detective Chief Inspector Sheila Stewart to say a few words on this event.
Morning. I'm delighted to be here today to return this piece of history to yourselves. This has been made possible with the assistance of the current owner, who has made the decision to return the sculpture. This is an excellent example of the results that can come from close cooperation between law enforcement, trade and scholars. The Art and Antiques Unit, one of the oldest specialist units within the Metropolitan Police, takes great pride in reuniting owners with their stolen property. Although the Buddha was stolen over 50 years ago, this did not prevent these being recognised, and credit must go to the eagle-eyed informants who made us aware that the missing piece had been located so many years later. I would like to thank my team for their professionalism and the dedication and their continued work in international collaboration between the UK, India and further afield. We look forward to continuing our strong relationship in the fight against crime.
So that was another fantastic find, and it was a great risk. And has it gone back to the museum? I mean, has it come back to India?
This was the actual ceremony that happened.
Oh,
This was when he came back to India, and you have the honorable ministers receiving it in Delhi.
oh, fantastic.
Having shown that, there are a lot more that that are happening. Yes, he is back home finally.
Fantastic. Welcome him also. So on that note, we have come to the end of this session. However, we thank you very much for your time. Once again, I, on behalf of the forum, would like to congratulate you on your latest case, the Ananthmangalam Rama restitution. That too in the year when Lord Śrīrāma is going to have his magnificent temple in Bharat. Thank you very much, Vijay.
So, Jai Hind and Jai Śrīrāma.
Jai Śrīrāma.